Hi everybody, it's Danny with Funukuleleprojects, and I have a very special instrument over here that I'm going to be talking about, and the project that it was involved with. Actually, you can see there are two instruments over there. I'll explain what the other one is. And the main instrument for this video is my new acquisition that was nearly 2 years in the making, because it took me that long to find a Favilla Teardrop, checking eBay and other places nearly daily. This one showed up almost a month ago now, and I won the auction. Fortunately, it needed a good amount of work, and it looked really bad, and I had a feeling that the photos were more cosmetic than structural, and fortunately I was right. They did have some cracks I had to fix in the soundboard, and there was a long crack in the back. The worst cosmetic issue was that the paint had worn off. You can actually see the quartz that the lady that owned it originally played. And this, probably was sold originally in the 20s sometime. The story behind this, the eBay seller actually was selling it for an elderly couple, and an 80-some-odd-year-old friend gave it to them, and that lady's mother played it for her when she was a child. And so when I saw this instrument, I thought, oh, I just so much want to give that a life back and give it a good home. And so fortunately I won the auction. So what I had to do when I got it, and when I first got it, I thought I may just leave it all worn out looking. But it had an issue, and the issue is very common with old instruments, and that's that the bridge needed to be reset. I always check that. It's the first thing I check when I get a vintage instrument, because as I've mentioned in other videos, glues have a life to them, and hide glues and different woodworking glues, that's about 50 to 70 years. If they're not under load, the non-structural areas can last longer. Not non-structural, continuous load-bearing structural areas can last longer, like the sides of an instrument with well-mated joints and things like that. But bridges are under constant load if they have strings. And so more often than not, vintage instruments have to have the bridge reset, or someone will buy an ukulele that's vintage, put strings on it, this story's coming up, and the bridge will pop off. So with this instrument, when I set the bridge back in place and I measured out where it needed to go, it was evident that Favilla actually had put it a little bit off. It was sort of like the fender. It was actually more than a little bit off. It was down and to the side. And so I wanted to put it in the right place, and in putting it in the right place, I now had bare wood in the back, and I had a choice. I either make that part of the story in a condition with the worn out paint up here around the frets, or I clean up the instrument. And I decided to clean up the instrument, and so I got black that matched not the original color, which you can see remnants of the original color right around the Favilla, but I combined two different black colors that matched the more oxidized look of the black that was on, that the instrument had become. And once I got that on everything, I actually brushed it on, but I have another brush that has super dense bristles that I can use to almost create a dry brush effect that also makes the paint look like it was sprayed. And then after that, I gave it a clear coat, basically a matte clear coat. But that itself, that wasn't the ending point. And these are the original markers, by the way. I cleaned those up, because I don't like working on something and having it look like it was just worked up. So what needed to be done next was to carefully wet sand the new finish with different grits of sandpaper, starting at 1,000 and moving up. And it wasn't like wet sanding to be perfect. It was wet sanding to distress and add patina. And when I was done with that, then I started with a conventional ukulele polish, but it wasn't going to look, I was looking for that a really old look. I will try to take some photos before this video is edited outside, so you can see that this doesn't look like I just spent a weekend working on it. It actually just looks like a really old instrument that has been cared for. I actually went over it with some, Howard's Feed and Wax to give the finish that flatter and more uneven look of an old instrument. I tuned it a few minutes ago. The Fremont black lines are still settling. I just love the sound of this little instrument. I can't see the strings on the black. Hold on. A couple things I really like about it. It has a very wide string spacing, very narrow neck profile. I really prefer that. And for a little soprano, that's really nice. I played Sweet Hour Prayer in the last video. Let me see if I can see the strings. I actually wear glasses when I'm working on things, but with the videos I'm not wearing them, and then seeing the black strings may be a challenge here. Let's see. Wonderful little instrument, has a wonderful sound to it. It took me 2 years to get it. Try scaling again. I just can't do that tonight. It's a very, very fun project, but you'll notice there's a second ukulele sitting here. And the reason that's sitting here is I want to explain my thinking and reasoning between why I will clean up an instrument like I did this one. It's in my personal collection, and as I said, it's not going anywhere. And why I may add some extra, like I did this one. I did the same thing with the camp ukuleles. If you watched that video, with my camp ukulele, I didn't do anything other than fix it, which was really extensive work, but in terms of the finish, that's essentially the original finish, just with some wax on it. But my wife's Lion and He the Camp ukulele with that beautiful stenciling, the stenciling didn't have anything protecting it, and it was starting to come off in the very bottom, and I didn't want to lose that. So I actually clear coated that with a real durable finish, and then I buffed it to really enhance the fine detail that was in that stenciling. And that way that stenciling will be there for many, many years. And once again, those are in a permanent collection. And so I didn't mind doing that because I just wanted to preserve something that was getting ready to start flaking off, because it already had come off in 2 spots. The stencil is almost perfect, except for 2 spots in the center. And so, it was in my collection. And so I did that. Now, I have an instrument here. This one actually belongs to Jennifer, a subscriber. And it's right-handed, and I tuned it a few minutes ago, but these strings were just put on last night. Beautiful sound. It's a vintage instrument. This was made, I think she said, probably in the 30s, and I think she said it's a Regal. There's no marking on it. She got this from Reverb, and this is a classic example of what I was talking about before. She put strings on it. It sounded wonderful. Bridge popped off, and so she asked me if I would be willing to fix it, and I said I'd be glad to fix it. I said, it's going to cost more to ship it back and forth than the repair itself. Yet, what I will do is it's a good example that I could use in a video in light of what I did here, and in light of a couple other restorations. One I just completed and one that I'm in the process of. So I wanted to, it was an opportunity to share my thinking with things. This instrument here is ready to go back. The bridge is on. I haven't done anything to the finish. It looks old, but the finish isn't checking or anything. It has a beautiful old patina. There's a little tiny crack. You really can't see it that well, but I would have to do a close-up photo. I have a photo that you'll be able to see, but little tiny crack in the rosette, and there was a gap in the bottom that I know what they did to fill the original hole. It wasn't like this had come off. It was actually filled originally, or there had been a repair many years ago using basically end grain sawdust and some glue to fill. Part of it came out. You could see where part of it was and part came out. So I matched basically some wood to the color of what was in half of it so that I filled the rest of it. I did that there to match the old repair. I mentioned to Jennifer that the crack here is so tiny that anything I do to actually try to hide the crack would be more noticeable than the crack itself. However, there was shrinkage in certain parts of the wood around the rosette. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but wood generally shrinks along the width of its grain. So it would shrink like this. And so it just shrunk. The rosette was still in place, but that's the beginning of pieces starting to work loose. So I very carefully stabilized that. I used very, very precise placement of cyanoacrylate and wiping the cyanoacrylate so it looks exactly like the finish. So it doesn't look like anyone's done anything to it, but the fact is those pieces aren't going to come out. And I chose to leave it just like that. And she asked me if there were other things I needed to. No, she didn't ask me. She said if there's anything else that you see that really needs to be taken care of, just go ahead and take care of it and let her know. But on this instrument, it's just so pretty that I wanted to, leave its age. And when I can, I will do that. I just got finished restoring restoring to plain condition an old, I'm going to mess the name up, a Nahu, I believe it is. For a lady that lives in the town that I live in. She's a music teacher and her family owned a music business. And what was wrong with that, and I'll put a photo up of what I did on it, it was a koa instrument, and it had, instead of having like this here where you got this rope purfling and you got this black binding, it actually had rope binding that was made of koa all the way up and down. And the way they did that was they used sapwood koa for the light wood and heartwood koa for the dark wood, and they went all the way around. And there were larger pieces, and back then they would have actually cut the pieces and put them in. And there was a section where it was missing here, and there was a section here, and she wanted to start playing it, and she was concerned that it was sort of sharp. And I said, well, I'll do what I can. I may just put a piece there, but what I did was I checked my wood. I have a few pieces of really old wood, and I thought I had, and it turns out I did have a really old piece, at least 30 years old piece of koa that had sapwood and heartwood that was very similar color to the rest of the wood. So in that case, in order to fix that ukulele, I actually hand cut the rope binding pieces to match the pieces that would have been in there. And I'll show a photo. On that instrument, there was actually a little thin sapwood koa purfling that went around before the rope binding went in. And I had to make a little tiny purfling strip to go in so it would match. And I'll put photos up showing the before and then the purfling being glued in, and then the after was put in, and after I shaded it. And then there was a section up top that needed some work. But after that, I left the finish exactly the way it was, because once again, that finish wasn't flaking off. It wasn't going to hurt the instrument, so I left it just the way it was. And I have another instrument that is, sitting. I don't know if I have a photo of that one, but there's another one. It's the same era, though that was a 1920s instrument, and there was a 20s era Kamaka. Actually, the Jason and Patrice of U-Space, they're the owners of that one. And it had the same thing. It had some of the rope binding pieces that came off down here. And in that case, someone had tried to repair it, but sort of botched it, and so you could see remnants of where the original rope binding was. And so I was able to hand cut pieces to match the pattern of the original, and I put that in place. Whenever possible, I want to keep everything as original as I can. And an instrument like this, it had issues that I needed to take care of, yet it's still real dark. You know, it looks dirty, and I want it to stay like that. So when I put the clear coat on, I make sure that it was like that, because that's years and years of use, and that's just, you know, grime and whatnot over years on top of the you know, the natural wood that was exposed with this original stencil. These are very dark tuners. They're actually brass. And I know some collectors will polish up the brass, but I like that old patinaed look. I don't want to remove that because these are the original tuners. And so that's sort of my thinking when I have a vintage instrument. If possible, and it doesn't look bad and the finish just isn't completely deteriorating coming off, then I like to leave it as original as possible. In this case, I really needed to take care of some things because the fretboard was going to start having issues, and so I cleaned that up. The frets themselves, they were originally painted, and I actually left the original paint still on these. I literally individually masked every single fret. Now, talking about a masking chore, masking the frets, not the fretboard, the frets, took a while. Yet I did that, and then also in sunlight, and once again I'll try to get some photos so I can put that up. In sunlight, you'll see that this is actually somewhat of a translucent finish. There are some spots here where the finish had gotten irregular and it was the wood was showing, so even though I put the black over everything else, I made sure to keep that the way it was. You can see the pattern of the wood, the different quilting that was in this, I believe it was like a maple ply. Some people say some of them were birch and then some were maple. And anyway, that was this project. It's a really fun project. I've been looking for one of these for 2 years. And I finally got one. You know, if you check eBay every single day when there's something you want, eventually it's going to appear again. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll see you in the next video.